shot, blue hole. Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Welcome to the birthplace.
Is it the replica house?
The house is open, yes.
It's
right over
open.
there now, yes.
So, okay. And this is just a visitor
This
center?
is the visitor center. We've got things from when Monroe was over in France as ambassador. For example, there's a plate that says M.A. on it, Marie Antoinette. He was over there before the revolution. He was over there during the revolution, and his wife was able to save Lafayette's wife from the guillotine, get them over to Austria, where Marie Antoinette's brother, Leopold, was king, and they were able to get them safely into a third country, and eventually Monroe invited Lafayette to come here after his 50 years to take a tour of the United States. We're just celebrating that now.
Okay.
So we've got those kind of things. We've got a uniform that was like the one he wore, the Battle of Trenton, where he was shot in the shoulder, almost killed. Washington, Monroe. Interesting enough, for that gunshot wound, you won't see any pictures of him elevating his right arm. So I think it probably severed some tendons. The brachial plexus may have been involved. Certainly there was some major injuries there. There's a picture of him that is in his colonial garb. So he was the last president to be a Revolutionary War veteran. And he maintained the use of breeches and such when long pants were becoming in style by the time he was president. But he kept that style for himself. There's a map that shows how the United States was 13 colonies, 16 colonies. Monroe directly was involved in negotiating with Spain for the purchase of Florida and the coastline. He then negotiated with France. Napoleon was the king of, ruler, emperor of France, and they were having major financial problems going against Russia in war, trying to invade North Africa, etc. They needed the money, and so they sold us Louisiana, Mississippi, the whole Louisiana Purchase going up to Ohio and Illinois. So under his presidency, through his involvement as the negotiator with these foreign countries, the United States went from a strip of land along the coast out to beyond the Mississippi, going across toward California. He was Secretary of State when Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark on the expedition across to the West Coast.
So the third person, Jefferson, is the one who got the credit for negotiating with Napoleon for the Louisiana Purchase.
Monroe did that.
Oh, Monroe is the one.
Monroe is the one who was the lawyer who could negotiate and find settlement. He was not one to litigate and have to fight. What can I give you? What can you give me? How can we make a deal that everybody walks away happy?
So he was
Napoleon, you want money? We want to not have Haiti sending all their illegals across the coast. Okay, I will buy that land for you, give you the money you need, and in return for which we get this swath of land that you really can't manage anyway. Spain, you've been at war with France, with England for years now. You've gone to bankruptcy 4 times in the 1600s. You're getting close to it again. How about if we give you a deal, we'll take this off your hand. There is no fountain of immortality in Florida, okay? Just put St. Augustine, put that aside. We'll take over those areas. We'll take responsibility for that. Georgia feels much safer not having Spain trying to invade. There are Jews living in Savannah. Spain is still going through inquisitions and the capturing and killing of Jews, torturing of Jews, was not something that Georgian Jews wanted to see. So he was able to negotiate a safe border by putting a perimeter. We now have that Florida, Louisiana area that's a safe border for Georgia. Now we've got extension across the country. And the Monroe Doctrine says any foreign country, any of those European countries that want to come over to America and try to run the place, we stand united. Before there's a League of Nations, before there's United Nations, he had already bound with the countries in Mexico, in Latin America to say, we don't need foreign influence here. We will take care of our own.
Is that the James Monroe Doctrine?
That's the Monroe Doctrine. That's him.
Okay. So the doctrine came into effect when he was the president, right?
Yes.
But the doctrine was in planning stages during the Jefferson and Madison time.
No, that was
No,
him. That
just
him.
was his kind of.
That was his personal touch.
Then how come he created a country for slaves and asked them to go
Right.
to Africa and create a Monroeville and all that? How that happened?
That happened. Okay, the story is Monroe grew up on a small family farm up here in Northern Neck. His father had an indentured servant that went to train with him to become a skilled carpenter, cabinet maker, furniture maker. He had probably up to 8 slaves working here, but some of those slaves may have been indentured servants.
Mm-hmm.
But this was not a large plantation. This is not the Washington, thousands of acres. This is not the Lee family with the various fields and various crops, with the grist mills, etc. He has a cow, he has a horse, he has chickens, he has pigs, he raises vegetables, his wife makes preserves. That's what they sell for making extra money, but mostly they're subsistence farmers. And he comes from humble beginnings. He's a common man. He relates to people. Madison, the president who came right before him, was born in this area, but moved out to Montpelier. He had family wealth. When his farm was taken over in recent years, it was by the Jesse DuPont Foundation, as in National Public Radio, as in the candy factories, as in the racehorses. They turned Montpelier into a trading ground for racehorses. It's that big a place. Madison goes to Princeton University. This guy goes to William and Mary.
Yeah. So it's
a good education.
Yeah.
It's a state school, and it held his own. So he was a common man. He got along with people. He worked with everybody. When he was elected president, they went through the same electoral college like we have nowadays. He got 99 out of the 100 votes. The one person who didn't vote for him said, only George Washington is entitled to a unanimous election. Otherwise, I give him my vote too. He was that kind of a popular president. His period was called the Age of Good Feelings. People worked together. There was none of this, black,
the bricklaying
white,
or
Republican, Democrat. No. Do we agree that the United States needs to be reserved? There's something here to stand up for. How we stand up for it, we can differ. But we all agree we need to take care of this.
Did he represent the Whig Party or the Democratic Republican Party?
I don't know about that.
Oh, you don't know that. So
anyway, the slavery story. So he had no animosity or hatred for the black community. When he was 19, 18, 17, young guy, they're meeting in Philadelphia for the Continental Congress. So he's not involved in that group. By the time it gets to the Constitution, he is involved. He's a senator. He's in Washington, D.C. Monroe, Madison, and Chief Justice Marshall. Share a house
John
together.
Marshall.
John Marshall went to school with him down in Northern Neck, okay? And so they all knew each other from youth.
And John Marshall went to William and Mary as well.
Exactly.
So,
thank you very much,
So,
when Marshall goes up to D.C. to establish the courts, Monroe and Madison up there as senators, and Marshall, because he had more money, bought a house, and the other guys split the cost. So the 3 guys live on Virginia Street, down the street from the White House. Okay, they're all neighbors. So the question becomes, what was this Monrovian librarian? He was not a big fan of slavery. But at that time in America, living in Virginia, it's just not a popular position. So what he put together is our Navy, if they see a slave ship coming to America, they will capture that ship, they'll commandeer, and they'll turn the ship back around and go back to Africa.
To Liberia, that's the Monroe.
And he established Liberia. And the capital Liberia is Monrovia, because he wanted to do what he could to turn around this slavery situation. To some extent, it was successful. People went back, but sending blacks in the United States back to Africa once they were here, that really wasn't happening too much.
Okay.
But he did turn the slave trade around. He sent folks back to Africa.
But if any slaves would like voluntarily want to go to Liberia, they were sent there.
Do you think that was possible?
What's that?
If a black in America wanted to go back to Liberia, could he just sign up for the trip?
Most of them didn't want to, but yes. What happened was, by the time they were freed or they had a chance for freedom, or by the time, even if they were slaves and they were allowed to go back home, they didn't know where home was.
Mm-hmm.
And for those slaves that were here in America, they've been here for a couple generations. They had no clue of the culture of Africa. They didn't want to come back. But those that did, there was a group called the the African Colonization Act. And James Monroe was part of that. Basically what they did is they raised money. So what happened was they negotiated with England. England gave them a swath of land in Africa we now know as Liberia. And sold it to the United States. The United States purchased it and gave it to freed blacks from America.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, this is your country now if you wish, and you can build it any way you want. They set up a constitution just like the United States. Their flag looks like the United States, and of course they named their capital Monrovia.
Mm-hmm.
But there was only one problem with it. The English, when they took the land, never told the tribes in that area that they owned it and they sold it. So the tribes in that area still believed that was their land. So they went to war with the American slaves. And that civil war between those two went on to these days, all the way up to the 1990s. That civil war was ongoing between the descendants of American slaves and those that came from America and the tribes in that area. And so it was, to this day, that's how come their economy was so much in shambles for so long.
Because of blood diamonds and the leader who came after, and now I think now it's a democratic country, but prior to that it was like a dictatorship.
It's beginning to resolve itself now, because it's been for so long. I mean, let's look at it this way. The Irish have been fighting for 400 years with the British.
Yeah, with the Northern Ireland issue. Yeah,
they hold a grudge too. So sometimes there's no easy answer. But the fact of the matter is that when Monroe put that order in, that the Navy would free all slaves and take them to Liberia and drop them off, because it ended slavery coming to America.
Okay. I didn't get your name, sir.
Lenny.
Lenny, I'm Pavan.
Hi, Pavan.
I have one quick question for you.
Sure enough.
Why President Monroe was the misunderstood president? The reason is what happened is, I saw his grave at the Hollywood in Richmond.
Cemetery, right.
So next to, closer to Madison. That's where Madison's is called the cage, and he's in there with not with elaborate dressing or anything.
Right.
So the second thing is I went around Washington D.C. and I figured it out that Monroe is not popular in Washington D.C. because he supported the Confederacy during the Civil War time. Is that the only reason, or the reason is
So
why is he not popular in Washington D.C.?
He's forgotten. I don't think he's unpopular. I think he's just forgotten.
He's forgotten.
People remember Washington and Jefferson. They were memorials to them.
But even the Madison is popular in Washington D.C. because the Library of Congress was named after Madison,
right?
And there were some Madison Square Gardens.
There's 3 reasons. 3 reasons. Number 1, he was anti-slave. And in 1830, he put a resolution in to end slavery, and people didn't like it.
Okay.
Because they had slaves. That's how they made their living, is through that system. So that was part of it. The other part was he's not as popular because he didn't write any of the great documents. George Washington gave us a country. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. Madison wrote the Constitution. James Monroe did none of that. But what James Monroe did that people don't realize is that he's the one that said, if you don't give us a Bill of Rights, I'm not going to support it. He talked to James Madison and convinced James Madison to put the Bill of Rights in that protects people. The first 10 amendments in the Constitution are the Bill of Rights, and they're all the ways that a government can subjugate its people and how they can empower the people. That was because of Monroe. Madison wrote it, but Monroe was the one that says, I won't support this unless you find a way to protect the people. He also negotiated the Louisiana Purchase. Thomas Jefferson gets credit for it, but James Monroe is the one that negotiated and came up with the plan. So he doesn't get the credit for that either.
Yeah.
So the thing is, everybody else gets credit for the things he did. as a result. George Washington educated James Monroe. James Monroe was angry at George Washington because he gave a treaty to Britain with the Pinckney Treaty. And what happened was, 10 years later, after he got chastised by George Washington, he learned George Washington was right. When it came time to renew the Pinckney Treaty, he wrote up a treaty that would have worked well for both sides. And he presented it to Secretary of State Madison and President Jefferson. Both of them looked at it, they laughed, and they said, we're not doing this, and they threw it in the shelf. As a result of that, the British got mad, they started taking our sailors, and they started creating havoc for us, and we had to declare war on them. We ended up at the War of 1812 because they didn't want to do any kind of negotiating a treaty with Great Britain. Monroe was the one that he learned from Washington. He wised up, and he was the only one. It was so bad that Madison and Jefferson were angry at him for doing it.
But he could have prevented the War of 1812.
Mm-hmm.
He could have saved Washington from being sacked. That's the kind of stuff he was capable of doing. He was working on it. And even though Madison didn't listen to him, and we didn't have a peace with England, and they invaded Baltimore and were coming for Washington, he was Secretary of State and Secretary of War at the same time. It's an interesting combination. And he, as a wounded Revolutionary War veteran, led the troops toward Baltimore to keep Washington safe as long as possible so they could safely evacuate. And after the White House was burned by the British and destroyed, when he stepped in as president, he had to redecorate the house and refurnish the house. And at that point, presidents weren't getting big salaries.
They didn't get
He
anything.
did this out of his own personal income.
They
Okay,
paid out of their own pocket.
he ended up being a poor man by the time he passed away, but he was always dedicated to public service, paying his own way along the way. But if you go to the White House, if you can get in, there's a lot of French design because he was a real Francophile. He liked the style of French.
See,
The thing is that everybody else got credit for something great. He did all the little things that was important that nobody really pays attention to. But he was the one that made all the things that happened that was good for America back then. All the things that were important. He tried to end slavery. He tried to get the Americans to negotiate with everybody and stay out of their fights. What he did was he negotiated with Great Britain the longest demilitarized border in the world where there's no military forts.
is with the Canada? That's the one?
That's the one. He negotiated with Great Britain, and that negotiation went so well that they took down all military forts on the border, and it was peaceful to this day. And the only reason, and what happened, in addition to that, that negotiation went so well that Great Britain turned from being an enemy of the United States to becoming friends with the United States because of him.
And it lasts till today.
To this day.
Yeah, today.
Many things that he does last to this day. The last time the Monroe Doctrine was invoked was by Ronald Reagan when trying to save Grenada. That's how he justified it. He invoked the Monroe Doctrine to protect Grenada.
The reason is like a couple of years ago, I went around Washington, D.C., kind of finding monuments for the presidents. And John Adams is the one who has been overlooked in Washington, D.C. There's no mention of him, like with a monument or anything. And James Monroe being the 5th president, even he's kind of sidelined. And all the presidents who came after, like there's the Eisenhower Memorial, there's the Lincoln Memorial, there is both Roosevelt's Memorial.
Monroe had his day. Right now, we get no love from the government either. When we try to make things happen in the government, they go, nah, okay, you're okay. We get very little love. However, there's a lot of things in the world happening that's beginning to make people realize that James Monroe was one of the kind of people who could fix that. And people are saying, they're now beginning to realize this guy actually was able to fix those kind of problems. Why are we having these kind of problems now when we have a template to work off of? Because this guy actually did it. He knew how to make peace. He knew how to negotiate trade. He knew how to get consensus of the people.
People's rights.
He's the only president for 8 years to run when there were, he destroyed all political parties. There were no political parties when he was president. He hired everybody based on the best qualifications. He destroyed the political parties. There were none. He destroyed them. When his party won, they won so badly that the other side's party was destroyed. And when they were celebrating, he turned around and destroyed that party too. Now there's no parties. The United States for 8 years ran without political parties. just people voting for the best people.
That's very interesting because like sometimes like the people who get memorial and statues are the ones who are being flamboyant. They kind of show off things like that. Like
George Washington was, James Monroe was a lot like George Washington. George Washington wasn't flamboyant, but he was the first.
first, yeah,
Everybody else grandstanded.
almost you would have lost the commander-in-chief post, right? I mean, the thing is like if there's no incident in that West Virginia town over there. So the interesting like that's what like. I kind of know a little bit about every president, about other than James like Monroe. That's the reason I came in to visit here, because like when I talk to people, they have to talk about George Washington,
Right.
was admired by everybody. Jefferson for the Louisiana Purchase. Until today, I didn't even think that. Yeah, it was that. I didn't know that. I was like Jefferson got all the credit.
And we got Florida because of James Monroe.
I didn't know that. I was more thinking like Theodore Roosevelt Rough Riders went and defeated Spain and they got the Cuba and the Philippines. I thought like Florida was that part of the deal, but
Monroe did it.
Monroe actually had peace with them.
so we got the Florida even before this Rough Riders against the Spain.
It was in Florida, Louisiana. Let's shoot them out.
Our northern border was made by James Monroe. He negotiated with
Florida,
Spain.
Louisiana, the purchases all over here. This is all called, Louisiana Purchase.
Better yet, the one up here. Everything that you see in blue up there, it's from the west, from the Mississippi West, the Mississippi River West, was the
the West
Louisiana
Coast.
Purchase.
To the West Coast.
All the way, Oregon and Washington State.
That was him.
Wow.
How many states came out of that?
Oh,
A good
so
15,
many.
20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even so, even a lot of British Columbia was part of the United States. What happened was after he negotiated the northern border with Great Britain, we lost British Columbia because we decided it would be along the parallel line. And basically, so we got some land on the east, but we had to give it away in the west. And so that's how we ended up with the border being on that 30th parallel. Is that what it was?
I think so.
I think
49th
like if we
parallel.
had to bring him back, we had to bring him back right now during these times. So
Yes,
we
absolutely.
need a great we would need a great negotiator.
Yeah.
That's right. So he finds peace, finds resolution.
He goes to many different countries.
So over here, he got a key to the Bastille. He has a plate from Marie Antoinette. He's recognized by Napoleon. This is one of the plates from the White House listing all the states when he was stepping in.
So when James Monroe was the president, Napoleon was still fighting the war with England, and he didn't go to the Waterloo at the time, right? Is it after
give me
his
the
president-
timeline.
timeline?
When was Napoleon in office?
The
while
Waterloo and-
Monroe
He
was-
was Napoleon was fighting the war during the time Jefferson was president and Madison was president. At the end of Jefferson, beginning of Madison, remember, at the Battle of New Orleans, at the end of the World War
Andrew
II,
Jackson, yep.
those troops that came to New Orleans were the British soldiers those were the very ones that defeated Napoleon. So they thought that they were going to come in and wipe out all the American troops with these great soldiers. And Andrew Jackson was the one that decimated them. Because they couldn't lose. These were the soldiers that stopped Napoleon. If they could stop Napoleon, they could stop those Americans. And so they sent them to New Orleans to take over the Mississippi. And they marched right up to Jackson's people, and Jackson's people let them have it. Now, of course, there was they didn't know the terrain, and they got themselves bogged in. But Jackson knew all the local people who knew all the land, and he exploited that. So by the time the British were ready to march onto him, he got them to go into the worst areas possible. And that's how he did it.
And that's how he got his statue right in front of the White House.
Yes, yes.
There's a Commander Jackson, not the President Jackson.
So was Jackson an outstanding president by comparison with Monroe? Nowhere near.
Nowhere near.
You know,
So that's, I mean,
Jackson, when the Supreme Court ruled against him, he did it anyways. He would defy them anyways. He would ignore the Constitution.
that's why like they put him in a commander suit rather than a president suit. So,
Right.
right. But he got a prominent
claim to
place right
fame
on
is he had a
the
big-
Lafayette Square. Huh?
He had a big farm in Nashville. He had hundreds of slaves. He ran a plantation, and he was a military man.
Did you watch the play Hamilton?
partially, but not the whole thing.
Okay, there's a part on there where they're talking about establishing an all-black regiment for the Revolutionary War.
Mm-hmm.
A guy, Hamilton's friend Hercules was going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
They had a problem with the state government said, if we do this, you have to have an officer who is white. They chose James Monroe.
Wow.
And he said, I would do it. And what happened was when Hercules got killed, his state government says, well, we're not going to do this now. And so James Monroe didn't get to lead them.
Did James Monroe inherited slaves, or did he buy any?
He had slaves.
He had some slaves.
Understand.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
His owning slaves, he didn't like it. He was friends with Lafayette, who was an abolitionist.
Uh-huh.
So they had the same idea. The problem was James Monroe was so in debt to the banks
Uh-huh.
that he was not allowed to free his slaves because they held his slaves in collateral.
Mm-hmm.
So even if he wanted to free them, he was not allowed to by law.
Did he write in his will to free the slaves after him, like George Washington, or
What's that?
like George Washington wrote in his will that the slaves should be freed after Martha Washington died?
Right.
Did President Monroe did something similar, or
he said
no?
he couldn't.
He has this-
He couldn't even
He was
after
in
him.
debt. The
He's
banks
already
owned
sold
it.
this property.
Uh-huh.
He's got a law office in Fredericksburg, which doesn't have slaves to it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He has a sheep farm out in Charlottesville, which is not a huge place and doesn't really require a lot of service to help keep the place running. And then he retires after his wife passes away to live with his daughter up in New York City. This is not
But-
something
No,
that
not
requires
even,
further
yeah.
The slaves that he did have, the banks owned.
On them.
He was not
Okay.
allowed to sell them.
Understand? Yeah. Because at that time, you can't really declare bankruptcy.
They were
Right?
held
You
in
had to go to
they
the
were held in
jail if you
collateral.
kind of
Yeah.
They were
in
held
debt
in
to bank.
collateral. He was not allowed to sell anything
Yeah.
in collateral.
Understand?
So he couldn't free them because the banks said, no, you can't do that, they're ours.
Mm-hmm. Did James Monroe participate in Yorktown surrender? I mean, I heard
wasn't
Lafayette
there.
was
He
there,
wasn't
but
that one, no.
Oh,
Lafayette
no,
was
no,
there. He was
Yorktown.
By
Washington.
that time, he had resigned his commission because he couldn't afford it.
ah,
He was broke.
Was he commander for the Virginia militia?
He was. What happened was his uncle introduced him to Governor Thomas Jefferson, and they liked each other so much, Thomas Jefferson promised to mentor him. But while he was mentoring him, he made him a lieutenant colonel of the Virginia militia, and his job was anytime there was the American Army was in Virginia, he would be the one interacting as liaison for the governor.
mm-hmm.
So basically, he was a lieutenant colonel. during that.
The interesting thing about Washington and the Battle of Yorktown, from someone who grew up around the area, is that Washington went to the College of Monroe to learn surveying.
Yeah.
And part of the area you'd be surveying is the towns like Williamsburg and Yorktown. His hobbies were going fox hunting. He would travel from Williamsburg into Yorktown and go fox hunting. He traveled those hills as a teenager having fun. His wife's family owned the property over in Gloucester Point. That was that was a Curtis family. So of all places for Cornwallis to come to, he just came to the place where Washington's been doing fox hunting, where he surveyed the land and knows the places personally, and his wife owns the land across the street.
Well,
He was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
So the thing is so he owns other Washington owns other properties, not just Mount Vernon, right? He owns.
But the Washington family is big.
Uh-huh.
He's got lots of siblings.
Right,
So you've got family in West Virginia, Kentucky, western part of Virginia. Mount Vernon is actually his brother's property that he inherits from him.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but there's lots and lots of Washingtons, and also his sister married into the
Philly Lewis.
Lewis family, and that's a big name here too.
Yeah.
So there's lots of property that's owned by those folks. I mean, the Lewises came from Gloucester. Okay, so if you go to Bowdoin, you go to Gloucester, that area, that's all part of the Washington. But Monroe, he had a family farm. His father dies when he's 14. He's trying to get a college education to make good for himself. He becomes a lawyer. He is not landed gentry. He's not Madison, He's not Jackson with a huge plantation.
So he's almost closely in reverse to Jefferson. I mean, in a way, because Jefferson was indented as well, and
Right.
he wanted to kind of free the slaves, but it didn't work out. Yeah.
So Monroe owned the land that University of Virginia was built on.
Ah.
Jefferson was his mentor. He moved into land next to Jefferson's Monticello, and he had acquired the property in downtown Charlottesville, working with Jefferson to fulfill his dream of building a college campus. He helped to establish University of Virginia. At the opening of University of Virginia, you had Madison, Monroe, and Jefferson, 3 presidents at the inauguration. I mean, just phenomenal stuff he did. I'm trying to think, there's a university up in DC where he also established university. Was it American U?
George Washington University?
George Washington University.
Yeah.
That was Monroe as well, right?
What's that?
Monroe was at the opening of George Washington University, right? George Washington American, one of those, but
I have to
Yeah,
go.
those are the ones.
Historic
Other ones are
universities,
done
but
by
yeah.
church, like
But
Georgetown
I
and all that are church.
so it was like American, George Washington, one of the major
One,
universities in DC. He also pushed for education because he knew that an education is your key to your future. Get an education, regardless of whether you come out, you start off as a dirt farmer, you can still make something for yourself.
Yeah. One of my child goes to UVA, so I've been to Monticello
Oh, good.
in recent times. And on 64, when you're driving, there's a historical marker. That's where you mentioned that all the 3 presidents met here to kind of plan for, because they were picking like 3 or 4 places, and finally they decided that it should be in
Monroe's
Charlottesville.
property, yeah.
And it's a
Monroe gave
beautiful
the property
campus,
for
yeah.
education, and then after that, he gave because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Charity is something that is not a kindness decision of the haves to the have-nots. You're blessed with success, and you have an obligation to be a good guardian for that success and to disperse it when you see someone in need.
Yeah,
And
sometimes.
so he
it's-
did
Mhm.
acts of kindness, but it wasn't charitable. It was just doing the right thing. You take care of each other.
Thank you very much, sir. So it's a
Absolutely.
nice conversation
It's great
because,
visiting.
I didn't know that much about Monroe before, and because wherever I historical sites I run into, I
Right.
run into Washington or Jefferson and Madison. That's pretty much,
Yeah.
and sometimes Wilson.
Right.
Yeah, Woodrow Wilson.
Woodrow
So,
Wilson is a
but-
big deal,
a
absolutely.
big deal.
Yeah.
But I found out that even James Monroe was the governor for Virginia and
He held all the offices.
offices. Yeah.
If you glance at this timeline, you'll see all the offices that he did hold. He was
Uh-huh. Oh, they were building a monument for James Monroe. Monument.
So we have a column there. We have the monuments to Monroe.
This is the bird cage, correct? This is
Yeah,
for,
bird cage,
this
yeah.
is the Madison's.
That was the old birdcage. They cleaned it up since.
Ah,
Yeah.
but that's the monument for Madison,
What is it?
James Madison. Is the bird cage? Is the Madison?
No, that's Monroe.
Oh, that's a Monroe.
That's in Hollywood Cemetery.
Ah,
Yeah, matter of fact, you got a picture of it here somewhere.
right on the banks of James River.
Yes.
Yeah. Timeline. Oh, that's.
He's
All right.
He's
yeah, there.
in the Assembly for Virginia. He meets with the Mohawks to try to establish a long-term peace treaty with the Native Americans. He's a member of Congress for 3 years. Law practices, but he works at the Court of Appeals. He's chosen Common Counsel for the Fredericksburg area. He goes to the Virginia Assembly. He becomes a member of the Commission Revising the Law of Virginia, Commission Minister to France under Washington. We just established here. He's already going up to be an ambassador for us. He's called from France. He settles out in Charlottesville.
Ah, Dolly, even Dolly Madison. So
Dolly
Madison
Maytag.
marries Dolly. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a very popular lady as well, who saved the portrait of Washington. She
That's
gets the
right.
credit
She
for
had
it.
all the important documents.
Yes.
She was the very last one to leave.
Yeah.
So Louisiana Purchase, he negotiated for 15 million, and the complaint we got from the president is, I told you to only spend 12 million. He said, it would cost us more to go to war for $3 million. We got it, okay? It's a good deal. He works with England to do the negotiations. If they would have listened to him in 1806, 1812, it would not have happened. It would not have happened. He goes back from the state, the federal government, to work for the state. He's governor. He's carried back up to D.C. He was Secretary of War and Secretary of State at the same time. Phenomenal president, re-elected president. Nobody's running against him. Monroe Doctrine. He brings Lafayette back for the triumphal march. He receives him. He wants to give him the Louisiana Purchase land as a governor. He's on the board of directors for University of Virginia, president of Virginia Continental Congress. But after his wife passes away in 1830, he doesn't live much longer. He moves up to New York City. But if you go to New York City, there's a place called Grosvenor Square. That's his daughter's family.
Ah.
She married well. Have you walked the timeline yet?
No, I did not.
Okay. You definitely need to do that and read all my little markings along the way. It gives you real flavor.
So I'll go around and
Absolutely. And
if
you've been to his Highlands already in Charlottesville? Have you been there yet?
I went to Monticello.
No,
but
you need to go to across the street. Let me find you Highlands. Do you have Highlands over there?
It's about, Highlands is up there.
It's up there, okay.
I'll put it up there.
Next time you go up there for a basketball game
On
or
the shelf somewhere.
whatever.
There it is. Highlands. It's right next to Monticello. The Monticello.
Right across the street from
Rack
Monticello.
Cards. I'm saying Rack Cards. They're right next to each other.
So definitely go back up there, check them out. Very smart people, very capable people. They'll give you a real flavor for his life in Charlottesville. Like I say, he was a sheep farmer. There's not a big plantation here. And there's also a very nice walking trail there. Just get there early enough in the day to walk during the daytimes.
thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I'll
Be
go.
well.
So I'll go around the timeline. If I feel any questions, then I'll come back.
Walk
So-
the timeline and take out of the paths around the outside for some
So
communal
here,
nature.
over there, I saw a marker saying that perimeter, but there's a tree across the thing, and there's a no entry, private property. That's not the line.
Okay, so the one that has a chain across it, that's where the county comes with their vehicles to do heavy cleanup and such.
Okay.
That tree fell within the past couple of weeks, and
And we
I don't-
can't go past
I don't
that.
have a chainsaw to cut that. You can walk past it.
Oh, you can pass.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you take this timeline down here and make a left-hand turn, you'll walk back around there.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're
Let me
welcome.
take some
Be well.
pictures.
That's what you're doing in the car.
Yeah. That's right. I'm glad they did that. Yeah. You just gotta get the rest of them picked up at some point here. I'm just doing a little bit at a time.
Oh,
That's right, that's a mess. Don't worry about that. Sorry. Gotta get the one behind it too.
and by the way, I went to Fort Monroe.
Fort Monroe, okay.
And it's a
So when
beautiful-
you go there, John Walsh is the fellow who runs that one. He's a good friend of mine.
Uh-huh.
And yet he built fortresses along the coastline. He established the perimeters. Interesting story is that Robert E. Lee, also from this neighborhood, was the military engineer who designed Fort Monroe. And so it was under Monroe that Robert E. Lee was able to achieve those things. And it's just interesting enough that that's where Jefferson Davis was held.
Yeah,
at
I
end
saw
of
the prison
war.
as well. Yeah.
But yeah, Lee designed the place and Jefferson Davis resided there.
Yeah. For a short while,
For
though.
a short while, yes.
We're gonna have to center this piece right here. I now know what's wrong here. It's not symmetrical. Benny. We're gonna need to push this plate a little bit more of this to the right.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're very welcome, sir.
I'm sorry.
I was saying, if you notice, this is not centered to that center